Was there a technical issue at your end,
I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm
or
sorry.
was it just? Was there a technical issue at your end because I couldn't hear you?
All
Uh,
this while you couldn't hear me?
no, for
I
some
am able
while,
to hear
for a
you.
little while.
I
Maybe it was
think
on my part, I guess.
I think Manav, it's on your part. I hope everyone else
Yeah,
is
okay.
able to. Also, this Niranjan, I was almost for a moment I thought that's Nilanjan. I thought, why is
Nilanjan.
Nilanjan sir here? Yes. In any case, in any case, I hope everyone is able to hear me. Also, I was not recording. And to anyone who's going to turn their cameras on, please know that this is going to go on our YouTube. So if you're a private person, you're not comfortable with that, it's okay. You can just keep your camera off. Maybe turn on your mic if you have to say something, and that will be quite all right. So let me continue. Right. I think from here, of all our politicians, he is the only one who seems to me have started off his political career in the right way, with the question of how to make our young people as good as possible. Like a good gardener, he's making the young shoots his first concern, and he's clearing out the old weeds like me who are messing up the young sprouts. And that's just the first step. Next, he'll attend to the older plants too. And if he goes on the way he started, he's bound to do our city a lot of good. Now, because we are personally acquainted with a very young philosophy enthusiast, Rudra, I hope he's still present. Adarsh, would you mind clearing up the context a little bit? Like, what is Socrates exactly talking about? Who is he talking about? And what's the context?
So perhaps you have said it earlier. We'll say again that Socrates is talking to Euthyphro, and the context is that Socrates is having a trial, I guess. Trial would be
Mhm.
the correct word as well, or the persecution. And Euthyphro is also in the same situation, and Socrates perhaps meets Euthyphro, and he goes on to ask Socrates, "What's the case that you are here?" So in
And
this
Euthyphro
context,
says,
Socrates is,
yes, and Euthyphro says,
yeah.
we do not know what Euthyphro is here for. That is the big thing, right? Well, why is Euthyphro here? But Socrates is here because Meletus has put up an indictment against him because apparently he's corrupting the youth. And this is popular knowledge. Everyone knows this, right? That Socrates was accused of corrupting the youth because he was creating his own gods, and apparently he was one of the sophists, the ones who propounded false wisdom to the people. So that is why he's going against Socrates. And Socrates, in fact, praises Meletus that he's doing a good thing, right? Because in order to save the young ones, if he's right, that is, he is getting rid of the old weed like me. Now, I do not know. I don't quite understand. Here is a small, short comment. I don't quite understand what is the tone of Plato's dialogues, because if you read it from, in a modern tone, all of this seems to be very sarcastic, almost as if Socrates is saying, yes, 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 he's doing a very good thing, right? He's doing a very good thing, getting rid of, you know, old weeds like me in order to save the young. So it can be interpreted in both the ways. Either he's being very sarcastic and thus also very annoying, which is which is what many people interpret him as, or he's being very genuine and serious. So we'll take him to be serious. Yes. So he praises Meletus, and then Euthyphro says to this, "I hope so." Right. I hope so, but I suspect, Socrates, that the opposite will turn out to be the case. If you ask me, he's harming our city right from the outset of his career by trying to harm a man like you. Interestingly, interestingly, Euthyphro recognizes that Socrates is a good man, and Socrates apparently does not. This is what gives rise to this tension. Is the dialogue written from a sarcastic tone, or can it be interpreted that way? I don't know. But all right. Right from the outset of his career by trying to harm a man like you. But tell me, what exactly would he think that you corrupt? Why exactly would he think that you corrupt young people? Socrates says his accusation is very unusual. He says that I'm a maker of gods. This is something that I've clarified, so I'll just go on to the next dialogue. Euthyphro says, I understand he's attacking you because of that divine voice that occasionally comes to you. Fun fact, this divine voice is called the daemon. So if someone is interested, he thinks you have invented some newfangled religion. He knows that an accusation like that is easily swallowed by the public. as I found out myself all too well. Whenever I speak in the assembly about religious matters and predict the future using my prophetic powers, everyone laughs at me and thinks I'm mad. But every word that I say is true. They're just jealous of people like us, Socrates. We should just ignore them. I bet the whole affair will end in nothing, and that you'll win your case, and I think I'll win mine. Here comes the interesting bit. I think Manav, you should read this, where Euthyphro reveals, uh, what is the nature of his
You
lawsuit.
can continue because I'm also like writing the notes, so you can continue because that will interrupt the pace, I guess. So, yeah,
I see. All right.
just take it.
So I suppose it's just me this time because Adarsh is sick. I realized it halfway through after asking him to explain the context of Miletus. Right. So Socrates asks, "Well, what's your case, Euthyphro?" And Euthyphro is like, "Well, I'm the prosecutor." And in these dialogues, Euthyphro says, "Well, I'm the prosecutor." Socrates asks, "Who is it?" And Euthyphro says, "My father." And Socrates is like, "Well, why are you, pursuing a lawsuit against your father?" And he says that my father has murdered someone. This is Euthyphro's reason to pursue an indictment against his father. Socrates says, "By gods, Euthyphro, people must be shocked that you're prosecuting your own father. You must have an extraordinarily profound sense of right and wrong to have had the confidence to bring such an action." I do, Socrates, I do, Euthyphro says. Now, here is the root of everything that is to come, which is Socrates um, saying that I assume the man your father murdered was one of your relatives. Obviously, because if he had been a stranger, you would have never have dreamed or have dreamed of prosecuting your own father for his sake. So interesting, right? And someone raised their hand. Yes, please go
Yeah,
ahead.
in case you want us to, you want us to also to read, I'm ready to read. Okay, you can consider me.
I
No
see, I see.
issues.
So
Yeah,
now again, I'm quite confused because we did not expect, people. I mean, older people to also be a part of, this reading session. I assume that you're an older lady, Miss Jayanti, or is the
young
profile
in
picture?
heart, young in heart, but I'm an older professor.
I see. So you're a professor. You're a professor of philosophy.
Yep.
I see. And where do you teach? May I ask?
I was teaching BITS Pilani for 9 years
I see.
and in Shankar College for 1 year. At the moment, I'm retired. I'm just a guest faculty in BITS Pilani.
I see, I see, I see. That's very nice. So, what you could do, ma'am, is you could just read right on from here, right? So, I've established that Socrates asks that you must have. He says to Euthyphro that you must have an extraordinarily profound knowledge of right and wrong to have had the confidence to bring such an action, right? Oh, I'm sorry, I quoted the wrong text. This is the one. Because if he had been a stranger, you would have never dreamed of prosecuting your own father for his sake. So, Jayanti ma'am, you could read this bit.
Yeah. Okay. I would read. Give me a moment. That's a funny thing to say, Socrates. What difference does it make whether it was a relative of wine? Surely the pollution is the same in either case. If you knowingly associate with a murderer, when you ought not to making yourself clean by prosecuting him, the only relevant question is whether the man was killed lawfully. If it was a lawful killing, then you can leave the matter alone. But if it was wrongful, then even if the murderer is a member of your own family, it's your religious duty to prosecute him. Now, as it happens, the man who was killed worked for us as a hired hand on our farm in Naxos. One day, in a drunken rage, he got into a quarrel with one of our slaves and killed him. So my father tied him up hand and foot and threw him into a ditch, and then sent word to Athens to ask the authorities what he should do with him. Meanwhile, he didn't bother about him and did not look after him, since he was a murderer, and he thought it did not really matter if he died anyway. And that's just what happened. He died. He died from the cold, and from having nothing to eat, and from being tied up, so that before the messenger returned from the magistrate, the man was dead. And now my father and family are angry with me for siding with the murderer and prosecuting my father. They say that he did not really kill him in the first place, and that even if he did, the man was a murderer, and I should not care about him, and that for a son to prosecute his own father is against religion, which shows Socrates just how little they knew what the God think about duty and sin. Sorry? Yeah.
I'm sorry, I was mute. Yes, I just asked you to, take a pause for a moment because I was asking Rudra if he's still there. Hello, Rudra. I don't think he's there. I was just making sure he's following through. Uh, all right. Does someone else wish to volunteer for reading, or I mean, Miss Jayanti also had a nice voice, so perhaps she could just continue. Ma'am, please. I suppose there must be
Jayanti
some
ma'am,
issue.
can you continue to read the part?
I see. I'll read it through till she comes back, right? So Socrates says, amazing Euthyphro, right? And he says, amazing Euthyphro to what exactly? Well, Euthyphro persecuting his own father, and yes, Euthyphro persecuting his own father because his father captured this murderer and put him in a ditch, and he did not care to feed him because he thought, well, this is a murderer, and till the time new information came in, the murderer died. So essentially, yes, Euthyphro's father killed someone, but the person who he killed happened to be a murderer in the first place, and that is why Euthyphro is pursuing an indictment against his own father. And so Socrates says, amazing Euthyphro, and is your own knowledge of religion and of what our religious duty is and what's sinful so exact that given the circumstance of the case are as you say, that given the circumstances of the case are as you say, you're not afraid that you may be doing something sinful yourself in bringing a lawsuit against your own father. Does someone has anything to comment at this point? Because I have. Adarsh, Manav, anyone else?
Well, I was wondering, like, a person killing a murderer, like, is it just as wrong as person just killing another person for some other reason?
See, can I give my opinion a little bit actually interacting with
Sure.
the literature?
Yes, sure.
Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost are the Christian concepts, right? So, though we say that part of religious aspects are also associated with the discussion here about what is ethics and what is not ethics. So, basically, like it differs from place to place, contextual to call something as unethical. Okay. So, whether to kill one's own father is justified or not, it's like if you see from other religious aspects, would you do it?
I'm sorry,
The
just to correct you,
question,
ma'am, to kill a murderer, you mistakenly said to kill your father, I think. So just to clear that up, go on.
okay, he's now he's got a okay. Only the murder is being being pinpointed, or even the father, because father has killed the worker, right? So he's also a murderer because without knowing the what he should do, he should. They call the magistrate. Magistrate is supposed to come and give the uh, final verdict, but he himself had tied him with all the hands and then throw him in the ditch, right? The cold, and he had died. So basically, he's also a killer. Father is also a killer. and he's turning against his father. Right? So, and he's also to be supposed to be killed. That is a point here, right?
Well, I think the question really is like in both the cases, is the severity of crime equal?
And
Uh,
also the thing is the burden of responsibility upon the father is indirect, because what the father did was, and this can be argued, that the father tied up the murderer, the original murderer, because he could have escaped, or out of spite, even that is justified, I suppose, in this case, that out of spite we slap the murderer a few times before sending him to prison. So he tied him up and he threw him in a ditch. And it can be argued, as I said, in order to make sure that the murderer does not escape. And so indirectly, the father resulted in the murderer's death, not directly. So that's also a point of nuance that we need to consider. Right, go
yeah,
on, Manav.
exactly. No, I agree with you on that point. So, because
So
in the case of father, he lets the murderer die, but whereas in the case of murderer, he like actively kills the slave. I guess was it the slave uh, who he killed?
yes, yes, yes.
Yeah. So there is a difference. So I think the father killing the murderers cannot be considered as wrong as in the other case. That's just my opinion.
Hmm. Well, I think I think that was all right. There's no question. I think those were comments, because I have something to add from my side as well, which is something that differs from the theme of the prior comments. It is that, notice how Socrates here, and of course, Socrates is abiding by his own, doctrine of the unexamined life is not worth living. But then there's also this issue of, well, if we eternally continue to analyze our lives, then that is not worth living as well. A life eternally analyzed is perhaps not worth living as well. Uh, and so at times, and this is a Zizekian idea if someone is acquainted with Zizek, Zizek says, and I'm pretty sure other scholars must also argue for this, that we do not need to argue if, say, rape is wrong or not. In certain debates, we need to be dogmatic and say, well, no, I'm not even going to have this debate. Because by allowing a certain discourse to be present, we are also implicitly agreeing that the antithesis of right has the right to exist, if that makes sense. And so, all right, sure, in this case, maybe Euthyphro is wrong to prosecute his own father, but maybe it could be the case that Euthyphro's father really, out of spite, killed that murderer. Or maybe, just a thought experiment, Euthyphro's father killed the murderer because, in fact, that murderer was having an affair with Euthyphro's mother, and so the father was absolutely outraged, angry, and so he killed him. And now he's taking this to be an excuse, right? So there's always a chance of a certain injustice being done if we pursue a doubtful line of reasoning, such as Socrates makes Euthyphro pursue, which is, well, do you know what is right and wrong that you're, pursuing this indictment against your own father? So that's what I have to say. Yes, Miss Jayanti, you can go ahead.
Yeah, it is not they in the literature which you have given us,
Mhm.
nothing of the mother or anything
No,
of
no, 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 no. That's of
yeah.
course. Yes, there's nothing
He's
like that.
if
What I'm thinking
he had
about
killed
is a
the
thought
slave,
experiment.
so what? Yeah, whatever is explicitly said here is the slave is being killed, so he
I
gets
think,
annoyed because
I think,
slave is part of him.
I think what my point was is that this particular line of reasoning to ask Euthyphro is your own knowledge of religion and of what your religious duty is and what's sinful, so exact that given that the circumstances of whatever, right? So he's asking Euthyphro, are you sure enough? But in cases of ethics, are we ever sure enough, especially through a line of reasoning? I mean, we have been doing ethical philosophy for 2,000 years, and still we have not been able to decide, well, what exact theory to follow. Is it deontology or utilitarianism or something else? So to ask, well, are we really
Ayush,
sure about this? It's yes, that in
Ayush,
itself might not be
uh,
fruitful. Others, go ahead.
wait a second. Yeah. So this meeting is now ending. So we are going to create another Zoom
There's
meeting
there's
as of
still two
now. So
minutes.
please join that meeting.
There are still two
Yeah,
minutes.
yeah. So
So
I just
yes.
recommended that. Yeah.
Yes.
Continue.
A small clarification before anyone makes their further comments. We are still quite poor people. We couldn't afford a subscription for Zoom, an annual subscription. So we make these 45 minutes meetings, and then we make another one, right? A free meeting. So this will end in a minute or so. But Ms. Jayanti, you can, uh, proceed with your further comment if you have any. And Niranjan, you can comment in the next meeting. Right, please, Jayanti ma'am, go ahead.
Yeah, so when we discuss in philosophical discussions, normally what is in the literature, first we have to consider, right? So what is explicitly said is already, like, no, he had killed the slave. That provocation had given. Okay, so if you're pardoning the father because it was out of provocation, that may be an argument. Okay, so like an angle of thinking. But then it's explicitly said the provocation is because of killing of the slave, right?
And
That
just
I
to be
sub
just to yes, just to be sure, the exact scenario here is before this meeting ends that the farmer was killed by a person who is the murderer, and then the murderer was killed by the father who has now become the murderer. Right? This is the context. I hope we are clear on this.
yeah, and
Yes.
nowhere
Okay.
the wife or
Right.
anybody else, no lady comes here.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
So we'll just make another meeting real quick. We'll send out a link on the WhatsApp chat, and then we can continue. I wanted to raise up an issue with this particular text, right? And in order to raise up that issue, I invoked a particular thought experiment. What if this were to be the case? So I do not mean to change the integrity of the given text. Of course, I was just going beyond the horizons of the text a little bit in the garb of a thought experiment. So
Yeah,
that was my
yeah.
intention. Yes.
Actually, Wittgenstein's reading in between the lines, all that stuff is there. But would it be included in the discussions? Like, would it be permitted? That's what is the question.
I see. So perhaps we should continue then.
Ayush, is it okay if I make a slight comment?
Oh yes, Niranjan, please
Yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. Now, I found it interesting that you mentioned Zizek. I mean, I appreciate Zizek more than anybody, but I assume so. To clarify, the idea is something like invoking moral skepticism on certain claims, and the example Zizek uses is something like, well, we don't want to live in a society where everybody argues and debates whether rape is wrong, right? I assume you're paraphrasing that to the
Precisely,
situation
yes.
here with Socrates. Yeah, gotcha. You know what? I would say this. Although I agree with Zizek on perhaps a practical level, partially, I would still oppose the idea. Not because um, now the thing is, people usually oppose this idea are the libertarian, free speech, Jordan Peterson types. What I would do is I would oppose this idea in a very Nietzschean sense, where I would go as far as to say rape isn't wrong as nothing is wrong as such. I would say the very frame in which we say things should be questioned, which is like, again, some things is like takes from postmodernists. I don't think, I think would any human, any psychologically healthy human authentically want to do rape? I don't think so. Absolutely not. But at the same time, is it a point of moral scrutiny? No, I don't think so. Absolutely not. I know this is a very very extremely controversial position. Nobody even takes, but I would go as far as to advocate that. If you get what I'm saying.
I see. I get what you're saying, and I do disagree with you. But for the sake of the present
Yeah,
discussion, we'll have to stick to this, right? Because it will just go off
yeah,
in a different tangent. So I
yeah.
appreciate the
I
comment.
understand. Yeah,
I appreciate the fact that someone
yeah,
is there who is familiar with Zizek, so they get what I referred to.
yeah.
So that's good,
Yeah. Cool, cool.
right? So now, yes, Miss Jayanti, please go ahead.
Yeah. One more point came up to my mind. Actually, like, sorry, this is out of context. Like,
Sure.
it's little away from the text. Okay, if we have read Godfather, okay, They're like, no, he says, like, if not to survive, the theory of survival, if somebody is ready to kill you or kill you, you should be like one of your people, should be ready to kill them. All right. So it's natural, like, if you don't kill, you get killed again, right? So the question of morality it will come only when you survive. Okay. So if you don't kill, if you don't shoot, and in Magnificent Seven movie also, if you see, he will tell, shoot, don't talk. Okay, the villain would be having the gun. If you want to kill, kill. Don't shoot. Don't talk. He would say. It's like there is no articulation available there. You can ask for ethical implication and behavioral motive only when a person is like in leisure. Okay. So if it is not so, then if a person kills immediately, you kill them to survive yourself.
I get what you're saying. To quote someone very unrelated here, once the great Mr. Shah Rukh Khan said, "Be a philosopher when you're rich." That I think mildly relates to this, but let's not go any further with this. Right. So moving on with the text. Right. So Socrates questions Euthyphro, right? Well, do you know what is good and evil precisely that you're pursuing an indictment against your own father? Euthyphro says, ah, well, that's exactly what distinguishes me from the crowd, my expert knowledge on all religious matters. So Socrates, so right, so from here on, Socrates is like, well, that's wonderful, Euthyphro. I'll be your disciple. Tell me what you know about piety and impiety, morality and immorality, so that I may quote you in the court against Meletus. Right. So Euthyphro says, by all means, of Socrates. And if he tries to persecute me, I'll soon show him who's boss. He'll be the one on trial, not me. Socrates says, I don't doubt it. That's why I'm so keen to be your student, because I've noticed that no one ever seems to pay any attention to you, not even Meletus. Yet for some reason, his keen eyes have spotted me almost immediately. And he's indicted me for being anti-religious. So please, in the name of Zeus and all the gods, tell me about this idea of religious duty and sin. And I don't mean just in connection with murder. I mean in general, because after all, isn't the religiousness or holiness of an action the same thing in every case? I mean, doesn't the same thing make every holy action? Oh, this is being right. Every holy action holy. And can we treat sin as a single thing too? Whatever it is that makes every sinful action sinful. So we are essentially going into concepts here, right? The Socratic idea of concepts. What is on the level of the general plane that makes something something? Euthyphro says, of course, and then Socrates says, well, all right, what is holiness and what is sin? Euthyphro says, well, holiness means and. All right, Miss Jayanti has raised her hand. I was just about to say, if anyone wishes to volunteer to read at any point of time, they can always raise their hands. Miss Jayanti, do you have something to say?
No. If you want me to read,
All right.
I'm ready to read.
I think I'll just very quickly go over this part of the page and then you can take over. Right. So, continuing with the text, Euthyphro says, well, holiness means doing exactly what I'm doing now, prosecuting a man who's guilty of murder or any other crime, whether he's your own father or mother or whoever. And not to prosecute a murderer is a sin. Here's a very solid evidence for my claim that a criminal, whoever he is, should never be left unpunished. Don't people regard Zeus as the very best of all the gods? The god who set us the clearest example of what's right, and everyone knows that he imprisoned his own father, Kronos, for eating his children, and that Kronos had punished his own father for a similar crime. And yet, when I prosecute my own father, they get angry with me. Socrates says, I wonder if that's why I'm being charged with impiety. I always find those stories about gods pretty hard to swallow. Now, this is interesting. Perhaps Miss Jayanti or someone else could clarify this. I mean, isn't there a tinge of atheism here in Socrates that I find those stories hard to swallow? But all right, we could perhaps address this later on. Maybe that's my crime. But since you know all about these things and evidently believe the stories, I'll obviously have to defer to your superior knowledge. What else can I do, given that I've freely admitted that I know nothing about any of it? But tell me, Euthyphro, I mean, seriously, do you really believe all the stories about gods? Euthyphro says, yes, Socrates, and a lot of other, even more amazing things that most people don't know anything about. Socrates says, So you really believe that the gods fight and are constantly falling out with one another and have terrible arguments and brawls and so on and so forth. The way the poets say, are all those stories about the gods really true, Euthyphro? He says, yes, they are, Socrates. And as I said, I can tell you lots about, well, the gods, blah, blah, blah. Socrates says, yes, I'm sure they would. But let's leave that to some other time when I've got nothing to do. For now, I would much rather get a more precise answer out of my question. What is holiness? So far, you've only said that it's doing exactly what you're doing now, prosecuting your father for murder. Euthyphro says, and what I said was true. Socrates says, no doubt, Euthyphro. But you agree that there are lots of other holy actions too. Euthyphro says, yes. Now I think from here it gets interesting, I suppose. Miss Jayanti, please take up the task of reading from now, from this point onwards, if you can.
Sure. So,
Yes.
no doubt Euthyphro, but you agree that there are a lot of other holy actions too. Euthyphro says yes. Socrates says, well, remember, I didn't ask you just to give me a couple of examples of holiness. I wanted you to explain the general form of holy actions, what it is that makes all holy actions holy. Don't you remember? We said there was one feature that made sinful action sinful, unholy ones holy. Euthyphro says, yes, I remember. Well, Socrates says, I want you to tell me what the basic feature is. That way, I will have a standard to refer to, something I can use to judge people's actions, yours or anyone's, and say that any action that is holy, any action that is not like that isn't holy. Euthyphro says, all right, sure, I can do that if you like. Socrates, well, go ahead. Euthyphro says, all right. Then here is what holiness is. Holiness is anything that the gods love. And sin is anything that the gods hate. Socrates says, fantastic, Euthyphro. Now you have given me exactly the kind of answer I wanted. Of course, whether or not what you say is true, I have absolutely no idea, at least not it. Although I have no doubt that you will be able to go on and show me that you are right. Euthyphro says, of course. Socrates, come on. Then let's think hard about what we are saying here. Anything that God's love is holy, and anything that God hate is sinful. And those two things are total opposites of one another, correct? Yeah, that's right, said Euthyphro. Socrates said, so are you quite sure about that? Euthyphro says, yes, Socrates, 100% right. Socrates. And we said just a moment ago, Euthyphro, that the gods are always fighting about things and getting angry at each other and bickering. Euthyphro, yes, we did. So what sort of disagreement causes that kind of anger? Asked Socrates. I mean, imagine, for example, that you and I disagreed about how many pebbles there were in a jar. Would a disagreement like that make us enemies and cause us to start beating each other up? Wouldn't we just work out the answer by counting them, and that would be the end of the disagreement? Euthyphro says yes. Socrates says, or suppose that we disagreed about how big something was. Wouldn't we just settle the disagreement by measuring it? Euthyphro says yes. Socrates says, and we could end an argument how heavy something was by getting a pair of scales. Euthyphro says yes. Socrates, well, what kind of disagreements can't be settled that way? What kind of disagreements make people angry and make them quarrel with one another and become enemies? Euthyphro looks blank. Maybe the answer is hitting you. Let me make a suggestion. Don't people only get angry like that and start fighting and bickering with each other when they are disagreeing about what's right and wrong or what's good and bad? Isn't it when we have disagreements about these kind of things and can't settle the disagreements that we fight and become enemies? You think so? Yes, Socrates, you're right. Those are the kinds of things we are usually disagreeing about what we quarrel. Socrates. So these quarrels between the gods, Euthyphro, when they occur, must also be the same sort of thing. Euthyphro, of course. Socrates. So that means they must disagree, according to you, about what's good and bad, right and wrong. Otherwise, there would not be any quarrel among us, among the gods. Would there be? Euthyphro says that's right. Socrates. Now, doesn't everyone, including the gods, love whatever it is that they think is right and good, and hate whatever they think is bad and wrong? Euthyphro says yes. Socrates. But according to you, the gods often disagree about what's right and good. So that means the same thing are thought right by some gods and wrong by other gods. And that's why they bicker and squabble and fight about them. Euthyphro says true. Socrates. So that means the same thing must be both hated by gods and loved by gods. Euthyphro. True. Socrates. Which would apparently make the same actions, Euthyphro, simultaneously holy and sinful. Euthyphro says, yes, I suppose so.
Miss
Socrates. Well,
Jayanti,
now.
could you take a pause there? So I
Yeah.
hope till here it's clear to everyone, right? Well, what's the exact problem in saying that to do good things is to do the things that pleases the gods, and to do bad things is to do the things that displeases the gods? The issue, of course, is, and we need a little bit of context about Greek gods. Of course, this would also make sense in Hinduism, perhaps, but not as much, because the Greek gods were really crazy. Just a bit of trivia, right? They were the craziest of the gods. You wouldn't find perhaps Hindu gods fighting, well, they do, for example, Ganeshji and Shivji. And in Abrahamic religions, that is, of course, not the case, because there's just one God. Of course, to some extent, if one finds this to be a problematic characterization of Hinduism, yes, there's also this one Brahman and whatnot. But in any case, in the Greek setting, some of the gods like took some things to be as virtuous, and the others had their own interests, and they were bickering and fighting. So if I'm trying to please a god, how exactly am I pleasing a god? Because the very action will please some gods and will displease the other gods. So it's a contradiction, right? I can't really say that, well, piety just depends on whatever the gods find pleasing. So that's the context. I hope that is set up till now very clear, and now we proceed again. And I think, Miss Jayanti, I'll take it up from here for a little while, because I'll just read it through rather quickly,
Yeah.
because we need to cover this
Yeah,
up,
I'll
right?
continue.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'll just
Yeah.
take it up from here.
Okay, no issues.
Right. I'll read this part of the page, and then you can go over again from this side, right? Because you're right and I'm the person who is left. So I'll just continue from here. Well, now, I'm really confused, Socrates says, right, from here. It looks like you haven't answered my question after all, because I didn't ask you to tell me what sort of action is both holy and sinful at the same time. But it looks as if whatever is loved by the gods may also be hated by gods. Just think about it, Euthyphro. In prosecuting your own father, you may be doing something that Zeus likes, but that Apollo doesn't like. Or maybe Hephaestus is happy about it, but it annoys Athena. And maybe other gods are frantically disagreeing about what you're doing too. No, Socrates, I think all the gods would agree that it's right to punish a murderer. There wouldn't be any difference of opinion about that. Socrates says, all right, Euthyphro, in that case, explain to me how can you be so sure that all the gods think that the higher hand who murdered your father's slave and then died of exposure when your father tied him up and left in a ditch was wrongfully killed, and that a son ought to prosecute even his own father over a man like that? How can you be sure that all the gods agree in endorsing your action? Prove to me that they do, and I swear I'll never stop telling people, I'll never stop telling everyone how wise you are as long as I live. Also, just a fun comment here. This could be the case of if psychoanalysis were to be a thing back in the the great 500 400 BC in ancient Greek. One might even call this psychological projection, the frequency with which Socrates again and again says, "You are so wise, and you would be so wise if you told me this." It's like, well, stop. You do not need to do that. It's annoying, but all right. Euthyphro says, "Well, I could explain the whole thing in detail if you really want me to, but it might take me a fair while. Socrates says, "Oh, I see. So you're saying I'm too stupid to understand?" Again, aren't I at least as smart as the jury? And I assume you'll have proof to them that what your father did was wrong and that all the gods hate that kind of thing. Yes, Socrates, beyond a shadow of a doubt, at least if they listen to me, well, they will listen. If they think that you're a good speaker, but listen, something's just occurred to me. Even if you do prove to me that all the gods see the death of the farm hand as wrongful, what good will that do us? What will that tell us about what holiness is? We still won't have a general definition because we've already shown that whatever the gods love won't do as a general definition. So forget about that, Euthyphro. Let's assume, if you like, that all the gods think that what your father did was wrong and hate him for it. Why don't we treat this new idea that just came up as a new improved definition, that whatever all the gods hate is sinful and whatever all the gods love is holy? Shall we make that a new definition of holiness and sin? Euthyphro says, I don't see why not, Socrates. And now, Ms. Jayanti, you can take it up from the next dialogue again, where Socrates says, "Well, I don't see why not either," right?
Okay, moment. Okay. I don't see why not. Socrates. Well, I don't see why not either. But that's not the point. You've got to decide, Euthyphro, if you like the new definition, and if it's going to help you in explaining things to me. That's what you promised. Euthyphro, all right. I'll say that whatever all the gods love is holy, and that whatever they all hate is sinful. Socrates. So, shall we carefully look into that new definition to Euthyphro and try to work it out if it's right? Or shall we just forget it and go home? Should we just accept whatever we and other people happen to believe? What do you think, Euthyphro? We should look into it. But I think we have got it right this time. Socrates, we'll soon have a clearer idea about that. Now, I ask yourself this. Do the gods love what's holy because it's holy? Or is it holy simply because the gods love it? Euthyphro, I don't understand what you mean, Socrates. Socrates, let me try to explain more clearly. Look, we talk about things that carry and things that are carried, things that see and things that are seen, things that bump and things that are bumped. You understand the difference in each case? Euthyphro, yes, I think I understand. Socrates, and similarly, there is a difference between things that love and things that are being loved. Euthyphro, certainly. Socrates, so tell me, is something that's carried a carried thing because someone is carrying it or for some other reason? Euthyphro, no, that's it, and that's a reason. Socrates, and something that bumped is a bump thing because someone bumped it, and a seen thing is a seen thing because someone sees it. Euthyphro, right? So it's not the case people see things because they are seen, say Socrates. It's the other way around. It's not the case that people see things because they are seen. Things are seen because people see them. And people don't bump things because they are bumped. They are bumped because people bump them. And people don't carry things because they are carried. They are carried because people carry them. Am I making myself clear, Euthyphro? Do you see what I'm seeing? Yes, I do, says Euthyphro. And Socrates. And the same thing goes for things
Miss
being loved.
Jayanti,
People, yeah.
if you wish to, just perhaps clarify what Socrates and Euthyphro have talked about here, or would you like for me to do it? Because this is rather important, right? This is an important
Yeah,
clarification.
this point is important because, like, you don't give a caption that something is bumped. Okay, you don't just call something bumped until and unless it is an object of being bumping happens. It is not bumped, right? So we are relating it to the cause rather than the result. Okay, so you don't just name something as you don't call a person killer until and unless there is somebody who is killed. If somebody is a victim, why do you call him a victim? A victim is there because he's being persecuted by somebody. Okay. Okay. Maybe it fair or unfair, that is not the question. Okay. So Socrates is arriving in a circular method to bring it to the fact that until and unless somebody is included in the context, they're out of context, right? So that he is bringing. So you're talking about gods and holy and unholy, and it all depends upon an incident. So the incident is given more important than the experience or the experiencer. The experience is given more importance than the experiencer and the experienced. Okay. So that's what is like. No,
I'm
you
sorry,
can if you
is the experience given more importance or the experiencer? The experiencer is given more importance,
no,
therefore the thing
Socrates,
that is
no.
experienced is determined to isn't it? Isn't that the case? I mean, the scene
So
is the
that is a
experience, and the person seeing is the experiencer. And because I see, that is why something is seen, not because something is seen, that is why I see it. So I think you got it the other way around. It should be the case that the experiencer is the prime thing supposedly, and the experience thing is because of the experiencer, right? Or
So this
or is
trio is being put in forward by Socrates. Basically, this trio we have to think. Okay, so if you see Advaita, basically I argue for Advaita concepts. So this trio, when they are culminating, then it comes into a state called Unmani Avastha, where silence happens. You and me are God, that Avastha. Okay. So, but then each of us are God by nature. Like when you say the God's world, whether it's holy or unholy in the world of God, how do we know? How can we discuss about something which is beyond our reach? That's a question, right? We are talking about gods, and if God loves, it is holy. If God doesn't love, those things are unholy. Okay. So if we are going to give a caption here based on gods, God, it should be within the realms of our thought. How can you say about something which whom we don't know? Okay. If you and I are God, then it's a question whether we can discuss about it. Okay. The total contextual thing is, if nothing is known to us, then how can we think about the realm of something else? That is one point. Okay. And second, like where you were putting your ideas forward, right? It's like maybe opinions forward, whether experience and experiencer, who is being talked about. So these two are worthy here to consider and think about.
there is in Benjamin Jovett's translation, right? This one, uh, it's slightly different in Socrates. Cites another example of this sort of causality in this relation between passion and the action and whatnot. And I would like to ask all of you, Ms. Jayanti, Adarsh, Niranjan, and everyone, if this particular instance of the causal direction, does it make sense or not? Socrates says in this version, neither does it suffer. So neither does someone suffer because it is in a state of suffering, but it is in a state of suffering because it suffers. So let me clarify first. I'm not disagreeing with the entire thing, right? I suppose a lot of these examples are very valid, but this particular one, it seems, is a little overstretched. It seems it does not make quite as much sense. Again, I repeat, neither does it suffer because, well, it is referring to a person, neither does someone suffer because it is in a state of suffering, but it is in a state of suffering because it suffers. What do you have to say about this?
Okay.
First of all, what is the difference between both the cases? The first is obviously I'm suffering, and the second is I think I suffer. Am I right? Like I'm using I instead of you for it.
I mean,
I guess you
uh,
haven't listened what I.
I mean, my idea is as follows. Like when he says, neither does someone suffer because it is in a state of suffering. But we as objects are interesting entities, right? Because we're not just objects, we are subjects. And if we are in a state of suffering, that state of suffering can also enhance our suffering, because we can always be like, oh my God, I feel so terrible today. And because of the realization that I feel so terrible today, I feel even more terrible. So in that context, I feel it is a little stretched, but perhaps this is a pedantic point to make, but I thought it was interesting, right? So that's that. If anyone has anything to comment, we can consider it, or we can
Well, I
move on.
think just like a little point. I think it's a like tautology, because when we say when
Yeah.
someone is in state of suffering, that just means that he's suffering. So it is just like a tautology kind of thing. That's it. You can go.
Fair enough.
Uh,
So I think we should move ahead with the text, right? Because there's not
I
much
have a
left.
question as well. Yeah.
Sure. Go
Yeah.
ahead, Adarsh.
Yeah. So I have the question on the whole method, like on the whole paragraph we have read till now. That doesn't it look that the way Socrates is carrying out the dialogue or the discussion makes the whole discussion redundant, in the sense that if we just focus on how we discuss, like how Adarsh is talking to Ayush, or how Miss Jayanti is talking to Ayush, we are not using that much of conditional statements, whether it is right or not, then the answer reply comes either or. But in the case of the discussion, it looks like Socrates depends so much upon the conditional statements that this dependence uh, creates some sort of redundancy and some issue with maybe the creativity of the
So,
dialogue as
yes, so
well.
before anyone goes ahead, two things. First of all, these are dialogues which are recollection of Plato, right? So, of course, this is not real happening. You should not conflate this with
Yeah.
reality. This is the imagination of Plato. So, we must give some, what is that thing? Give them some slack. We should give Plato some slack, or Socrates some slack, because it is the recollection of Plato. Socrates was his teacher. Of course, there will be generosity there. The second thing is, yes, it is justified that it makes the dialogues redundant. Even Bertrand Russell said this, right? He used a very interesting word. I had to Google it up. Unctuous person, an unctuous person. An unctuous person is a person who uses flattery to win someone's favor in an inappropriate manner, and that is what Socrates does. He's not honest and he's dishonest and whatnot. So yes, if Russell holds that view, then you can as well. Perhaps that could be worth arguing for. But that's that. Those are the two things. If anyone else uh, wishes to say anything. All right, I think we should go ahead and finish this up. Right, there's just a page left. So I don't exactly remember till what point did Miss Jayanti read. I suppose something like here. Well, why? I don't see why not either, but that's not the point. You've got to decide, Euthyphro.
That must be right.
Uh,
That must be right.
that must be right. So I suppose from this point onwards, I'll continue, right? This is clear, I hope. So it's not the case that people see things because they're seen. It's the other way around. Things are seen because people see them, and people don't uh, bump things because they're bumped. They're bumped because people bump them. And people don't carry things because they're carried. They are carried because people carry them. Am I making myself clear, Euthyphro? Do you see what I'm saying? Euthyphro says, yes, I do. Socrates says, and the same goes for things being loved. People don't love something because it's a loved thing. It's a loved thing because people love it, right? Euthyphro says that must be right. Socrates says, so what we're claiming about holiness, Euthyphro, isn't the claim that what's holy is anything that's God loved, that is loved by all the gods. Yes. And do the gods love it because it's holy? Yes, that's why they love it. So the God loves it. So the gods love it because it's holy. We are quite sure about that. It isn't the other way around. Holy because gods love it. Apparently not. And we must also understand Euthyphro's intuition here. We cannot say that just because the gods love it, that is why it is holy. Because then, I don't know, if a god one fine morning decided that to beat up Adarsh is a holy act, would the world come up, gather up to beat Adarsh? Well, maybe not. It would still be unholy. So, Euthyphro says, apparently not. Socrates says, but it's certainly God loved because the gods love it, obviously. So that means that what's holy can't be the same thing as what's God loved. They must be two different things. Important, right? Euthyphro says, why do you say that, Socrates? I'm a bit confused. Socrates says, well, because we're agreeing that the gods love what's holy because it's holy, which means that it isn't the other way around. It isn't holy because the gods love it. Correct? But what's God loved certainly is God loved because the gods love it. Euthyphro says true. Well, they're not the same then. Look, Euthyphro, if what's holy were exactly and precisely the same thing as what's God loved, then it would follow that if the gods love what's holy because it's holy, then they must also love what's God love because it's God love, which they don't. And if what's God love is God love merely because the gods love it, then what's holy should also be holy merely because the gods love it, which according to you it isn't. So this is slightly confusing because it does not clearly Socrates or the dialogue itself, it does not make clear why is this assertion put forward, and this is put forward because of this, right? So if what's God love, if God's love what's holy, it's because it's holy, and this is not the case. This is not the case, Socrates says, because already Euthyphro has said it. So that's the context. And then because that is not the case, then what's God loved is God loved merely because the gods love it. Then what's holy should also be holy merely because the gods love it, which according to you it isn't. So in fact, they apparently work in opposite ways and must be two quite different things. One of them is what is merely on account of the fact that the gods love it. Whereas in the case of the other, the gods love it because of what it is. So two scenarios: one where you know gods love it, therefore it is holy, and the other is where the holy thing is holy thing, and therefore gods love it. And it is what it is independently of the fact that they love it. Right? This is the second case, I suppose, where it does not matter what the act is, if the gods love it or not, they just love it because it is what it is. So I think you have been playing games with me, Euthyphro. I asked you to tell me what holiness really is, and it seems you have sneakily refused to tell me what essentially makes holy actions holy. And instead, you have just toyed with me and told me that something happens to be a property of holiness, namely that the gods love it, but you haven't told me what it is. So stop holding out on me. Go back to the beginning and tell me again, from top, what holiness is and what sin is. So Euthyphro says, Socrates, I don't know anymore how I can explain what I think. Yes, I see that. Somehow or other, our ideas, as soon as we set them down, seem to keep getting up and scampering away from us. One interesting way to understand this would be through sets and subsets, right? So whatever, here is the precise thing, right? What happens to be a property of holiness? So holiness is the set, and the subset is some things which are pious or holy, they're loved by gods. But everything that is loved by gods is not supposed to be holy, right? So it goes one way, but not the other. One is the subset of the other, but the subset is not, well, the set is not the subset of the subset. That can't quite be the case. So that's that. मैं थोड़ा सा बेवकूफ हूँ.
It just came to my mind. I think we should start with the discussion because this section we had already covered in the last
Yes,
meeting.
I suppose, I shouldn't be a teacher. Dionysus, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to condense the whole idea in
Oh,
the words
please.
of a famous philosopher. I might have commented that earlier. To quote JC, No Church in the Wild, is pious because God loves pious. Socrates asks, whose bias do y'all seek? Now that is peak poetry, you know what I'm saying?
Well, yes, that's well put. But then again, it comes back to Socrates, right? And if it comes back to Socrates, then maybe we should look at Socrates' idea in itself with more nuance. So, I mean, if you're learning things from Kane, you might even end up hating the Jews, So maybe not.
Oh, wait, who was that? Kant?
Kane, right? This is that
Oh yeah,
Oh,
Kanye. Okay, cool,
Kanye,
cool.
yes.
Yeah, okay, got it. I suddenly heard Kant, and I was like fucking surprised. No, I mean,
Right.
yeah, I don't know, man. I think Kanye is just crazy. I don't think he's anti-Semitic as such. I think he's just off the fucking nuts. Because you know what the problem with
Please
his position is?
mind the language, right? Because it's a bit
Oh, okay,
formal. I mean,
cool.
we're trying to be formal, of course. We can never be completely
Oh, okay,
formal.
cool. Yeah, yeah,
Yes, of course.
yeah,
I mean,
sure.
I don't know the reality of things. I'm here, I'm doing this boring thing, reading out this 11-page text. So I have to crack a joke, right? So I just, whatever came to my mind, I said
Yeah,
it. So
yeah.
that's that.
So
But like as
I'm
far
just
as I've understood, like the main point was that the things that are holy, the rightness of an action is independent of God's. It is not something which is good because God loves it, or uh, they command it to be good. This this dilemma of Euthyphros often comes up, crops up in the discussions of like philosophy of religion. So I've heard it there as well, so I can like sort of resonate with it. How's your opinion there?
But then again, the thing is, I mean, just well, first of all, from a theological point of view, modern theologians might say that this idea or this conception of the relationship between divinity and morality is quite impoverished, right? Because in some way, God is the one who pronounces morality into this world. And so, spontaneously at the same time, God himself is immanent in the morality. People could use vocabulary of this sort because the entire structure of the text was uh, quite, I mean, well, transcendental in the sense that there is God and there's morality and then there's us, right? But what if in morality itself, God is immanent and morality is in some way immanent in us? We just want to do good things. And so, because we want to do good things, morality is immanent in us. And through that, God is immanent in us. So, whenever we do good things, we are doing deeds of God. I could be an amateur
So
theologian as well. So it could be argued in that way, right? From a theological point of view, this text is now perhaps quite outdated, although I did not have time to go through a lot of literature regarding this. So I might be wrong, right? Totally wrong.
like
Can I
what you
add
mean
something to
is,
that?
Oh,
go
sure, go
ahead.
ahead.
Oh yeah, yeah, Manav, you can go ahead. That's fine. Okay.
Okay, Nahi, I just wanted to like reassure that Ashbir, like, do you mean by what you said that the actions that are right are ones that which reflect the nature of God, something along those lines, if I'm not wrong. Uh,
hmm,
because like what does being eminent in God or us means? So I would be a bit confused.
It means that it is not that God is this other entity loving what is moral. God
Yeah.
himself is moral, So in that sense, God is immanent in morality itself, you know. But then you couldn't account for
Like,
evil
uh,
in this immanent view of morality. If whatever is good is where God is, then you'll have to probably appeal to some sort of a dualistic theology where there is a God for good and there's a shaitan or a satan or whatever devil for the evil.
Yeah.
So yes, that's
I mean,
still
sorry to
open.
interrupt, Ayush.
Yes, yes, please go ahead.
No, couldn't we? Yeah, just one point about the God thing. I mean, they could just define something like, well, whatever does not apply to God's moral rules is evil, essentially eliminating some sort of moral neutrality. They could just, I don't know, work with that. But that's not my the point I was trying to bring out. Like, the reason this is like a sort of related point to what Manav said. Okay, what does imminent mean? And sure, okay, eminent means inherent within God itself. That's what somebody like, let's say, I don't know, William Lane Craig or Planninger would say. It's like, well, God, the very action of God, the characteristic of it is morally perfect, something of that sort. What I hate about that particular characterization, and even the definition of God itself. And what Manav asked is a very, very significant question in a linguistic sense, in a Wittgensteinian sense, which is that does it make sense to even speak the word God? So if you take something like God is omniscient, omnipresent, none of these words mean anything because language as a whole the word must exist in some language game. And we don't have any absolute quote unquote objective language games. And how are we supposed to make out the meaning of God itself, the word God in quotes? So that would be my claim that God doesn't exist because it makes no sense to speak of it. If you get what I'm trying to say.
Do you
Yeah.
know of this vehicle? It's called
Other way
Jugaad.
or something.
There is this vehicle called Jugaad.
Uh-huh.
Do you know of it? Does someone know of it?
Uh, I think isn't Jugaad like the frugal innovation thingy, like where they take a lot of waste and convert it into
Yes, yes. I mean, it's a
something?
very popular word. Jugaad is like, oh my God, I cannot get in that seminar, right? Or perhaps for the cool kids, I cannot get in that
It's more
party.
of a hack.
Hmm.
Yes, yes, it's like a cheap hack, right? So I cannot get in that
Hmm.
seminar.
Hmm.
Do some jugaad so that I can
Hmm.
get in, right? But there's a vehicle named
Hmm.
jugaad. I mean, I read it in my fourth standard
Okay.
general knowledge book. I hope that book was right, because that's my
Hmm.
citation, my fourth class GK book.
Yeah,
And
it's cool. Yeah.
it's a vehicle where that sort of a trolley which workers use to carry around resources, materials, and whatnot. So take the behind of that trolley, right? Remove the front wheel, and instead of the front wheel, attach a half bike, that moped thing.
Hmm.
So those e-rickshaws you
Okay.
see, right? Think of that e-rickshaw as
Hmm. Hmm.
half e-rickshaw and half just a some sort of a back of a trolley, and they make it. It's not like industrially produced. It's just a jugaad. It's just cheap hack in terms of vehicles. No. Well, if say
Yeah.
the word did not exist, right? Or you know, eh, all right. Think of this. Think of this. When I call the vehicle jugaad, what am I doing? I'm essentially taking the word jugaad from one language game. I do not understand language games properly, by the way. I've just heard of the later Wittgenstein from YouTube
Hmm.
lectures. So I've not read
Yeah.
philosophical investigations.
Hmm.
But I take out
Hmm.
the word jugaad from one language game, and then I use it
Hmm.
to denote something, right? And of
Yeah.
course, intuitively to
Sure.
you, it makes sense. Intuitively to me, it makes sense. It is a word play. It is a metaphor. It is something which is a violation of the language game, but the violation of the language game precisely makes the word meaningful. Do you get it? That's the thing. Think of a pun. What's a pun?
Nah.
What's a pun exactly? Think
Oh
of it.
yeah, I understand the point. I
Yes.
agree with it. I agree. So it's like pun, irony, sarcasm. Absolutely, I agree with. I'm not saying that the word God doesn't exist. I'm saying that the word God exists and it means things in language games. So, for instance, in Christianity, maybe I don't know, depending on who you ask, it's either Father, Jesus, Trinity, or all of them. That's what God represents. But what I am saying is God doesn't exist in an absolutist language game, which is required for people to characterize it as morally perfect, omniscient, whatever absolutist object, quote unquote objective terms we decide to use. I'm just saying God, the word God can't exist in an absolutist language game because absolutist language games, by definition of language, how language comes to be, doesn't exist. It's not that I'm not saying God doesn't exist or the word cannot exist or the word doesn't mean anything. It may mean stuff, but it's not the omniscient, omnipresent God that we refer to. And the second
Mhm.
thing is, while Wittgenstein was a religious person, I think he can be wrong about stuff too, right? It's not like the example of Kant. Kant sowed the seeds of destruction for Western metaphysics, but then he sort of went against this philosophy and started believing in Christ, right? So it's like
He went against his philosophy and started believing in what?
Christ, Christianity. I think he was Christian, if I'm not mistaken. Pretty
Yes,
sure he
but
believed in
but
religion.
but how did he start to believe in God? He was always clear about this, right? That we cannot. I mean, if I'm getting it right, he was always clear that we cannot speculate the nature of God, but the idea of God, freedom, and the world are still regulative principles. They are in the realm of faith. They cannot be rationally known. That's the thing, right?
Oh
So
yeah, I agree. I'm just saying his claim with that goes directly against his critique of pure reason, or actually just critique of pure reason.
But how does it go against the critique of
Okay,
pure
so
reason? I'm sorry.
I mean, okay, the critique of
I
okay,
think, yes, I think I'll have to correct you here, because I suppose the idea you have is that Kant in some way had this idea that, because God cannot be talked about rationally, therefore you shouldn't believe in God, or that is the incentive. Well, that's not the incentive,
oh no,
because
I
he
don't think Kant
says,
had that idea.
yes, because what Kant's idea was precisely that there are three metaphysical entities precisely which we
Yeah.
must inquire into. That is God, freedom, and the world. Right? What's the nature of the world or substance? People translate it in different ways. Now he says through pure reason you cannot inquire into these things, because after a point of time reason breaks down, results in paralogisms, antinomies, whatever you used to call them, anabolisms,
Yep.
right? But these metaphysical ideas still remain regulative principles, right? So in some way, he recognized this need that, well, I cannot just stop believing in God. Of course, I'm not going to, because I know that he exists. But that then is based on of faith. So he saved science in a way, right? He's the crystallization of that attitude of the church does its own thing, and the theologians, they do their own thing. So the theologians just ask you to have faith in God, and the scientists, they inquire into the world through pure reason, and they are doing it in the realm of phenomena. So that is how it makes sense.
Oh yeah, I
I hope.
agree. I 100% agree with you. I do recognize that Kant did what separate faith and metaphysics and so on. But what I'm saying is something like what Kant started as a philosophical project started. That's the keyword. Is the end of Western metaphysics. That's what Nietzsche took on. This is like Nietzsche's main criticism of Kant. It's not that Kant was, let's say, a bore, as he calls Plato. It's more like Kant did something so magnificent, but he did not have enough spirit, enough courage to see it through. Because once you see it through, that's like that's a catastrophe that he couldn't handle, and he was scared. That's a catastrophe of the death of God, of nihilism, right? That is my point. I'm not saying that Kant himself said something. I'm just saying Kant was contradicting himself when he went to that extent, because the direct implication of his philosophy is the end of metaphysics, is the death of God. That makes sense.